I'd like to share with you a little Torah thought. This week is Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Shabbat, and there's various explanations for why. But one of the customs that we have on this Great Shabbat is to read about the sacrifice that was brought in the temple, the Korban Pesach. And I'd like to share with you an idea that I think is interesting vis-a-vis the current situation in the world with the coronavirus, etc. So let's read from the Talmud. And the Talmud teaches us on Pesachim, page 64b, and it tells us the following historical story. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis teaches us, Pam achas bikesh Agrippas hamelech litin einav ba'ochluse Yisrael. Once King Agrippas wanted to figure out how many Jews there were. He wanted to make a census of the Jewish people. So he came up with a novel idea, and that's of course not a novel virus. And he says, Amar le l'kohen gadol, he told the high priest of that time, Ten einecha b'psachim, count the amount of Pesach sacrifices that were offered. Natal kulia mikol echad, they took one kidney from each sacrifice. V'nimtza'u sham shishim riboy zuge kolyos, and they saw that the total number was 600,000 pairs of kidneys, which means to say there were 1,200,000 sacrifices offered that year. Kiyotze Mitzrayim, equal to the amount of those who left Egypt. Chutz mitame v'shahaya b'derech rechaika. And this, of course, excludes those who were ill. Those who were unable to bring the sacrifice for ritual impurities, or those who were distant. Continues the equation and says, Ve'enecha kol Pesach Pesach, and each one of these Pesach sacrifices had at least, Shalei nimnu alav yoser me'asar b'nei adam, had at least 10 people associated with each one of them. And therefore, we're talking about a minimum of 12 million Jews who came to offer the Pesach sacrifice. That, my friend, is the exact opposite of social distancing. When you consider the size of the Beit HaMikdash and the area that they brought these sacrifices, we're discussing for each one of these sacrifices you had a minimum of one participant or two participants who actually showed up at the Beit HaMikdash, who actually showed up in the Holy Temple, which means to say that you had a minimum of 1.2 million people in the temple on that one single day. Now, when you want to consider the size of the temple, it's certainly, the area where the people brought the sacrifices was certainly no larger than a football stadium, actually considerably smaller, which means to say, and they did it in turns, all in one day, but they did it in turns, a total of 3 turns, which means to say in each turn you had a minimum of 400,000 sacrifices, which means 400,000 lambs were actually brought into that space with at least 400,000 to 500,000 people in that small space, which means that they were literally jam-packed, kind of like a mosh pit. Certainly, once again, the opposite of social distancing. At a certain point, they would then all take out their knives and would slaughter the sacrifice. Quite a unusual visual, but my point is the following. In order to even come into the Beit HaMikdash or to partake from the sacrifice, you had to go to a mikvah, which means to say that at least 6 million people went into the mikvahs in and around Jerusalem within a couple days. And then to eat the sacrifice, this was families together, 10, 20, 30, 40 people together, each one with an oven. It was a portable oven, kind of like a barbecue. And then they would eat it all together. But you have to imagine that's a minimum of 12 million people, most likely sitting outside for the most part, around the streets and parks and open spaces all around Jerusalem. That, my friend, is the exact opposite of social distancing. As we are in this very unusual time in the history of the planet, I think it behooves us to not imagine what Pesach might be like when we're all back together with our family. I think it's time to set our sights a little bit bigger and to imagine that and to pray that we're not looking to get back to normal. If we're looking to get back to normal, what was the purpose of this entire event, if we want to call it that? It's time to open our minds to a much greater possibility, to the possibility of celebrating Pesach the way it's meant to be celebrated. In the Beit HaMikdash, in Jerusalem, with the entire Jewish people, not just our families somewhere in Miami or New York or Connecticut or France or Italy, but all of us together, the entire Jewish people together in the city of Jerusalem, and yes, with no masks and no gloves, all of us sitting together, enjoying the Korban Pesach the way it's meant to be, but this time celebrating not only the redemption from Egypt, but the redemption from thousands of years of exile, and the redemption of the entire world from 5,700 years since we left the Garden of Eden. If you celebrate Pesach as simply a remembrance of time past, you're missing the entire point. Celebrating Pesach is supposed to energize us and to make us consider a very, very different future. And that's what Pesach is really about. So as we go into this Shabbat Hagadol, into this great Shabbat, let's hope and pray and open our minds to the possibilities that are in front of us and prepare for a Pesach, not in our homes in social distancing, but in Jerusalem with extreme social closeness. Shabbat Shalom.